Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on what I hope is a lovely morning or afternoon, wherever you are. This is Amanda, and I'm filling in for Jeremiah, who's out in Dubai right now, which is really cool. We've got a good crowd joining us today, which is great because we're going to learn about a topic that I like to think of as one of the major backbones of the software. Blocks are a very basic tool, but can give the drafter a lot of power to move very quickly. And once you get a handle on this topic, it will really open up a lot of customization options to you and your firm in the software. Jake has a great presentation lined up to go through everything that you need to evaluate your use of or elevate your use of our software and hopefully spark some ideas to do something really interesting with your design. As always, if you have a question that you'd like answered during the webinar, fill in the box to the bottom left. And if you want to just chat with the other attendees or you have some ideas maybe that you'd like to share that this webinar is sparking, you can go ahead and do that in the chat box at the bottom right. So get your questions ready. Without further ado, I'm going to pass this webinar right over to Jake.
Perfect. Thank you, Amanda. Welcome, everybody, and really excited to be talking about these blocks today. It's a very interesting subject because if anybody is a CAD user, they know what blocks are. Now, to whatever level that experience is, basically it's just one of those understandings that that's kind of how you work. Maybe don't understand the reasoning behind how certain things function, stuff like that. We are going to try to keep this at a very basic level, yet still sort of breach a few different tips and tricks, and even then integrating into land effects how we actually handle stuff. So as we go through our agenda, you're going to see that kind of how we here at Land Effects utilize those blocks, how we actually set up our blocks, and kind of versus your setup. Now, we need to sort of preface that you may very well have a very similar setup to ours. So what we show, don't take offense to anything, but just know that even me personally, coming out of school and how we were taught and sort of gathered blocks as we started creating CAD drawings and stuff like that, it was somewhat rudimentary. And so how we can actually improve upon that. So then obviously bringing those into our system so that you have your blocks. We're going to talk about types of blocks, from everything from just what a standard block is, and move through some more advanced features a little bit, and then hopefully that sparks a lot of interest and questions, even comments. So again, please give those over to us so we can answer those. Going into proper block setup, this is mainly things to think about as you're saving blocks, as you start to get more familiar with blocks, and what they possibly should consist of, and any type of guidelines that you may or may not want to be following as you start putting these together. Because as we put together our blocks for our libraries, there's definitely a very strict procedure that we need to follow so that everything really aligns and functions properly when it comes to actually using those blocks within your drawings. After that, we're going to kind of talk about how those blocks actually function within AutoCAD. So really understanding what you're looking for when working with those blocks, what kind of tools are there for you to help speed those processes up, and then obviously I'll be breaking for any questions that may or may not arise. So we'll start with a very basic, what is a block? That block is a collection of objects, whether that is just lines, polylines, arcs, or even sub-blocks or additional features within that, and grouped together into a single named object. So when these blocks get inserted into CAD, that block gets defined into that drawing. And you may have heard the term block definition, and that is really what it's referring to, is that block now resides in that drawing for you to pull from when needed. So the only way to make those permanent changes to that specific block, if there was ever to be corrections that were done or revisions done to that block to update it, it can't be on a project by project basis. Technically it can, but it's not going to really affect that source block. So kind of thinking back to what kind of changes you really need to be making to that block. Is it going to apply to all instances of those projects where that block is found? You really need to be making those changes there at the source. But as you make those changes to the source and you have a block in a specific drawing, you may see that it doesn't update itself with that new change. And why does that happen? It's basically because there is a definition of that block already stored in that project, and it needs to be redefined or removed completely from that drawing and reinserted with that new definition. We're gonna, Amanda and I had a little bit of fun coming up with this analogy, so bear with us, and hopefully for those who are just coming into understanding blocks, or those who do understand blocks, maybe this correlation will sort of make sense, so we'll give it a shot. Think of this as you having a recipe of something. Our example here is a cake. So think of all of the ingredients as that line work and those objects. Once those are all combined together, you bake it and you get a block, you get a cake. And you can insert that cake into we'll call it our project here, and we'll insert it in and use that throughout the drawing into your design. That block definition actually gets saved into that project, and we'll call that project the recipe or the cookbook. So that block definition is basically that recipe so that you can pull and reuse if you need to at a quick glance. Now, this means that as we start to add these blocks into our library and save these blocks, we're adding all of these different recipes there for quick reference so that we can just plop that in there and it automatically comes in. We don't have to recreate it. And the way you really need to think about blocks, or if it really deems to be a block, is anytime you're dealing with any type of repetitive line work, it should be a block. And that goes to anything, not only just plant symbols and benches and stuff like that, but anything you find yourself recreating over and over and over, you should have as a block. And we have several categories, and we'll talk about those here. And you can see over to the left is our structure, or just a sample of our structure of where blocks reside. And we even have that might be a little underutilized, the detail blocks folder. And that folder really consists of, and it's actually showing just a couple of the categories up at the top there with masonry, metal, is little bits and pieces. So as you make your own details, even the little pieces that you might be putting together to create a detail, it does make sense to have those pieces as blocks so you can quickly insert them in and move more fluidly. So just thinking about what kind of work that you do, what kind of designs that you do, what do you find yourself doing over and over, those should be blocks. And more than likely they are, but if they're not, this is definitely something to think about. Not only does the block save time just inserting that one instance and having everything created, but it does reduce the file size. You're not recreating line work, it's reusing that same line work across your drawing, so it keeps your file size down. So it's another really big benefit to using these blocks wherever possible. So the example to the right is what I used to use in school as a polling reference point of any type of block. We've definitely seen several instances where templates have a much cleaner version of this, but where they pull from. And in our you know experience here is having a structure to where land effects can pull from and assign things appropriately. It's a lot cleaner, a lot easier to navigate and make those changes. So really thinking of how that whole function works is sort of how we're gonna try to pull from old versus new. So we're gonna jump right over into CAD so that you can see some examples of just what land effects uses as blocks. So um, anyone new to land effects or anyone very experienced with land effects has simply placed plants and or irrigation or run a schedule, used any type of callouts. Basically what you see here on the left is a very small snapshot of where we actually use blocks. Every one of these items is a block, and even some of these items are blocks within blocks. And land effects is able to harness those and make them function in a more streamlined process with obviously um, more code and different things that it's doing to it. So even showing these different colored valve symbols, all of these are the same block, but being able to apply specific layers and stuff like that. So what we're going to kind of get into is, this what kind of blocks that we do have and which ones we should use and can use, and then even what we can save into our system and how we actually go about saving those. So, and sort of what to look for. So, we've all seen a lot of our different blocks that we have available for site or vehicles or people, but I want to sort of take a little step back and be able to explain how our system actually works. We do have a cloud-based system. That cloud-based system is there for the user to be able to go into any of our folder locations. So all of these was that example of that folder structure. And as you go into one of these different areas, you see those different subcategories and those different folders. And this is where you have every possibility to add your own folders within here and keep your own blocks structured in this similar fashion. So when you come over to your site furnishings and see an example of or a slide shot of all of your different types. Now, the really neat thing about our system is we're continuing to add blocks practically daily. And what you'll see is there's no additional effort on your part to actually see those new blocks because they automatically download as you come into these previews. So some I actually have worked on helped a couple people and seen that they've placed our new hammocks, and those new hammocks are extremely new, and they weren't even in this category before. So being able to see all of these new items as they get pulled in and dumped in just gives you that power of having just new blocks constantly or revised blocks constantly, and seeing what these are. So you can absolutely add your own to these existing folder structures, or you can add your own folder and have your own set of blocks. And obviously, depending on the install, we have updated all of our content, and we have even put color and cleaned up the line work a little bit so that all of our blocks actually show color. And so you might see some of these new blocks that we've downloaded for vehicles. And if you use our site color hatch tool here, our color wheel flies up and it automatically turns on the color layer that is within those blocks. So sort of jumping around a little bit, but that block setup, what kind of benefits do we have with creating layers? You can see here that we have that ability now to turn on and off the color as needed if we're doing rendered plans. Within that color, obviously they are on a specific layer so that land effects as it integrates with and works with these different colors has the ability to even go a step further, which we'll cover in a little bit. But what's so neat about this is you may not have seen these cars, or you may have seen our motorcycle guy and used it in your project. Once you use one of the blocks, it downloads into your folder structure, and it's saved there. We will not touch anything that's existing in the system. We will just add to it. So if you try to use our color system tool and you see that the motorcycle guy doesn't color at all, you may have an old instance of that block. So how do you actually clean up your folder structure? I want to kind of show that really quickly so that we know as we look through, you may see, for example here, we have restructured the way that we name our blocks. Again, a very important thing to think about as we start adding all kinds of block types. So we can see that we have standing people, and we have walking people, and we have sitting people, and we have people playing sports. So how do we really categorize that stuff? And so we've done a numbering system, and again, this goes to however you really want to see your stuff, but a numbering system makes a lot of sense because we can alphabetize it and we can put them into the categories. So as we add more blocks, we can just dump them into their category and they will get organized into the right spot. If you have the old system and you have the old blocks where we called them people, they're all mixed in together, which doesn't make a lot of sense. We can quickly go through, and we're going to navigate there right quick. If you go to your land effects folder and into our blocks folder, this is where these folders and files are getting downloaded automatically. If you've made any changes to those, we have documentation that says back up your stuff. If you have any of your own custom blocks within these folders, make sure you don't delete those because we don't back up your blocks. We simply have the ability to replenish what blocks that we offer. So coming into our plan graphics, into our people, you're going to see our new downloaded slides and any file that we've actually downloaded into the system. And then you can actually see all of the old blocks. If you see a bunch of the old blocks in here and you know you haven't changed anything, or even if you have changed stuff and you want to clean those up at a later time, you can definitely extract these out and put them in a different location, or if no changes have been made, go ahead and just delete them. So I'm going to delete those guys, and we're just going to come back here. And as soon as we come over to our people area again, you're going to see, I've actually placed some of these so they're showing up, but they actually get removed from this list. So you got a nice clean list again. So a lot of times too, shutting down CAD and reloading it will sort of refresh those pages for you. So just something to think about as we get into what blocks that we have available and existing ones that you have. So these are just blocks. These are just line works. If we were to explode this guy, he's just line work. Now, there are other types of blocks. If you've seen in our list the blocks with a D in the name, we'll come to an amenity and we'll come to our boulders. And you'll see some of this where we've got our boulder 1 foot boulders and our 3 foot boulders and our 6 foot boulders. If you see right here, we have an actual 3 foot D boulder. The D we're representing as a dynamic block. And so what does that mean? We have the ability to put different parameters on a block to make it function a little bit differently. So if I select it, you can actually see that this guy has a little drop down arrow. And there's different ways that you can create dynamic blocks. We're actually going to go through how to save a specific type just in a real quick instance. But this guy has a list of different shaped boulders. And what's really neat about this is it's basically a visibility state to where it's just toggling different versions of a boulder so that we can function with the same block throughout the drawing but still not have that static copy paste look and still be able to only have one instance of that block definition, not several types of block definitions. So that's going to that power of what kind of blocks we use. Dynamic is one that we are coming into a little bit more and understanding that we do have a lot more power with these. So where can we actually apply those? So we are thinking about as we get into our call outs and our some irrigation components, plant labels, different things, to have those blocks be dynamic so that you have multiple options of that type of call out, or that call out grows with the plant name so that you can really have the power and the flexibility that you're looking for. So if you guys have ideas of what kind of blocks might be really neat to be dynamic and how those would function, we're definitely for it. So I'm going to jump over, unless Amanda, is there any questions at this time?
No questions just yet. So just a reminder to everybody listening that you can put in your questions at the bottom left box. And if you have any questions at all or any like, how do I do this? Definitely put those in there and we'll answer them during the webinar.
Cool. So I'm going to show, and this is going to be our little sample of saving blocks into the system. I've got my own blocks and how those actually function. So one thing to understand is, as we are saving this, there's multiple ways that you can save blocks. From the AutoCAD way of just our right block version, or just creating the block instance in the current drawing, or using some of our features. I'm going to focus on how you would save them into our system, because there are actual additional benefits that I'm going to explain as we do this. So basically, there's a couple things you need to prepare for as you're saving these blocks. So understanding obviously what's going to be in that block. For example, this tree right here, we have all of our different line work for the branches, for the canopy, for the trunk. And the reason that we've gone this detailed on the colors and the layers, you're going to see here in my layer list here, that we have these all on separate layers. And the reason that we have these all on separate layers is so that we have the flexibility as we print and we use our CTB files, that we have our different thicknesses based on color, and we have the ability to manage those layers within the actual layer properties manager, so that it's not just all on layer 0. So when it comes to cleaning and freezing and showing different things, we have a higher range of flexibility when it comes to that. So we do believe that everything within a block should have a block layer. And if you're going to follow our standard, we make it really simple, and starting that layer name with LK. Anything with LK is a block layer, because the way that a block functions outside of that is that if you insert a block with regular AutoCAD, it gets inserted on the layer that is active, which can cause a problem, especially if you have set all of your line work to layer 0. That block will take on the colors of whatever layer you set it on. Doing it this way and having specific layers set and not on layer 0, they hold the colors which they are. Land Effects takes it a step further and automatically places specific items on specific layers so that it helps you organize stuff. But just understanding that creation of a block and manually inserting it into CAD is a little bit more sensitive to where it goes. So basically, if we know what we want to include, we can, the AutoCAD way, we can select it and we can type B for block or type block, and you get this block definition. You would give it a name. You're going to give it a base point. If you didn't select the objects, you can select the objects that you want within the block and how it behaves. And then a very important part is the unit settings. How is that block actually drawn, in what units? Because as you insert these blocks into specific drawings, it actually takes that unit setting and applies it. So if we've all dealt with this, if we've inserted something and it comes in way too big or way too small, it's basically because the unit setting on that and that conversion, or however big that actual block was, wasn't set correctly. So all things to think about, but we're actually going to step back and show you how to save this guy into land effects, because once you do save this in, you do need to see how it looks so that you can choose it. So basically a preview slide. So what I want to do is I'm going to get rid of my color guy here, and we're going to shrink up the frame here. And basically, if you've read any of our documentation on how you save your blocks in, you know that we save or snap a slide that displays here. So as you look at one of these are all slides that AutoCAD is letting you preview so that you know what to pick. So we want to make sure that that slide looks really nice and it matches roughly that aspect ratio of that item. So basically shrinking your whole window or moving it in so that you have just your model space showing in a small spot is what we want to do. Any one of these tabs, depending on where it is that you're trying to save. So we have in planting if we want to save a plant block, or inside if we want to save a different site amenity or an elevation graphic, or in details if we want to save an actual detail block. Land effects is helping guide you to where those are supposed to be placed. So for example, in planting, we have a save plant block feature. And in the command line it says to select an existing block or an insertion point. So the insertion point, we would want to obviously be very careful with where we're putting this, and we'll place it here, right in the middle. And then it says to select the objects. So I'm just going to window across everything. And then I'm going to right click or hit enter, and you can see that it's actually already navigated us to the proper location in your land effects folder to where you can make that judgment call on where you want to put it. So we'll put it into this standard folder here, and there is some layer name or block name that does need to you need to abide by. So basically land effects does look for specific words in the block, so starting it with tree so that it knows it's a tree, and then whatever you wanted to put that tree number as. Saving it here gives you that preview that we're looking at and the ability to set these. And this is a great segue for understanding what kind of block that we want to set. Now, a manual one, land effects is actually going to let you, when it gets inserted, choose the size based on you dragging your mouse out, or you can set it to follow a specific scale or be placed at the size that it was drawn. So we know that we drew this tree, it has a potential to be whatever size, and land effects actually handles that automatically. So we actually don't need to worry about the overall size, but we know we want it at 1:1, and we know it was drawn in inches. So you also have the ability to set a manual rotation as you insert it. But we're going to say OK. and it saved it into the system. You can quickly test that out if you go ahead and come into your planting and see there's our tree. There's the preview slide, and there it is. So quickly you can grab it. Since he's in generic, he will scale manually, and he gets placed in there. So just know that as you pick it for a plant specifically, it will abide by the width that you give it. So again, going to how Land Effects really works with inserting blocks, it does things a lot more automated, which is really cool. Again, if we want to save this guy into Site, we can go over to our Site tab and choose Save Block. I'm going to choose a insertion point right here. I'm going to choose my objects, and it pulls me to my plan or my blocks folder for anything. So I can put it into an elevation graphics, and it's a site structure, and we can call this guy bus stop. We'll save him. So you'll notice that my preview slide looks terrible, and we can fix this later, which I want to show you. But I also drew this at 1:1. He's the right height, so I want him set it at 1:1, and we'll say OK. So now he's saved into the system. What's cool, and the proper way of actually setting up a block in any fashion, whether you right block it out, is that these blocks need to be in their own individual files. So what does that actually look like? We can come back over to our area here, into our elevation graphics, our structures, and you can see Land Effects has created that slide and its own individual folder, or own individual DWG, that I can open up. And if we minimize this guy really quick and come over here, this line work is the only thing that resides in this file, and that is what we want. The other things to think about as we actually want to make proper blocks and make sure they have the appropriate stuff in them is we need to make sure a few things are set correctly. Land Effects is going to handle a lot of these if you use our Save Block feature, but if you right block something out, a few things that you need to think about and guidelines that you need to follow are making sure that your units are set. And if we type units, you can see that my units here for the insertion scale is set to unitless. And Land Effects automatically puts it to unitless because it helps if you're working between different unit sizes. It'll actually choose the appropriate unit that it should be and put it in there appropriately. The insertion point, obviously we need to make sure that he's going to be getting placed at the insertion point here at the bottom of our little gazebo thing. Now, if I have a different insertion base point and we type ins base, this should be set to 0, 0, 0. Just for the simple fact that we don't want these objects getting inserted if we just say insert where they are at a crazy distance away. So making sure that 0, 0, 0 is set, and making sure a really quick test is to draw polyline and the insertion of the polyline is at 0, 0. See that it comes from that base point. If it comes off of the screen, we need to move our little model guy over to 0, 0 so that he matches. This looks good. The other things to think about is any type of dim styles and text styles. We want to try to eliminate anything that's residual in another folder that you or a file that you created that block from. We want to make sure that layer 0 is sort of set to active, and we purge and we clean this drawing. Now, as we talked about at the very first, the only way to make that change or make sure that you have the real definition And the true definition in there is to make sure you don't have any other instances of a block in this file. So if I go ahead and type the AutoCAD insert command, this file should be blank. If he has any other definitions of blocks within this file, we need to get them out, because all that's doing is it's going to be cluttering up every time you insert this block into that other drawing and bring in unnecessary block definitions. So you can always type PRG, which is our land effects command, which runs purge 4 times and gets everything out of there. Or you can type purge and you can look at blocks. And if there were blocks in here, you would see a little plus guy and the names of them, and you could select them and get those out of there. So again, proper and cleaning up a block for that setup is really what we're looking for on these. So he looks good. We're good with that guy. So moving on, we're going to get it a little more detailed on these guys and show you a dynamic one, unless, Amanda, there are any questions.
There were a few questions, actually, some really good ones. One of which were, how do you retake the thumbnail of the picture if it doesn't cover the whole screen? And we kind of responded to that. You definitely want to use the mslide command. I don't know if you have some time to quickly show that.
Yep, let's do that right now. And I'll open up the file that that slide was messed up on, and we'll get him sort of reset up to match that that little window here. So it's interesting. Okay. If you, or actually if we go over here so you can actually see, where do we put it? Oh, elevation, sorry. I'm in the wrong spot. All right. You can see that slide is that terrible looking slide of the overall shot. So what we're going to do is we're just going to type mslide, and it pulls open right where it's located, and it names it exactly what the file name is. So we'll just hit save, and we'll say yes to replace it. So done. I can now go back over to my site structures, and you can see that it updated it with what was in that slide shot. So it's as easy as typing mslide when you have that file open and positioned right, and he will get fixed. So, all right, moving on. We're going to close this guy down, and we are going to look at a dynamic block. So as we here at Land Effects are looking into easier ways and more flexible ways of how to work and use blocks and stuff like that, we actually have stumbled upon a couple things. So one that I really think is nifty is our north arrows. We have a bunch of different north arrows in our discipline graphics. You can save your own styles in here however you want to. But what's interesting is that we rotate the entire block. However, what I've done to this guy is just have the ability to rotate the arrow. So if our north is not up, we can actually position it somewhere else. And that is within the block itself. And this is a dynamic block with the rotation on it. So how do we get something like that? This guy is just line work. Now, something to be said, because I know we're going to be cutting it close here, is depending on what you're saving as a block, you need to make sure that you're doing it at the appropriate scale. I am going to save this stamp here into our system, and it's going to be incorrect, but I want to preface that I know it's going to be incorrect because basically you would want to do this wherever it resides and at the proper scale. So in paper space is really where you should be doing this one, so that he looks like the right size. But that being said, if we go ahead and for time's sake, we'll just go ahead and we'll block him. Give it a name. Now, we've already selected all the stuff that we want in it, but we do need a base point for this. So I'm going to pick a point and basically want to plop him in with the center of that circle guy. And make sure that I've set the other stuff here, and I'm going to open in the block editor. So this block editor is kind of where you would be making these and adjusting and adding that dynamic side of things. So if we want to, we can set a parameter. And this parameter here, and we'll pop this guy out so we can actually see what's going on. This parameter gives us a lot of different options here, and this is where we can do our visibility state ones, but we want to put a rotation on it. So down on the command line, it's asking where that base point is, so we'll say that this is going to be our base point from the rotation. And then it asks for that radius, so we're just going to match it with roughly with the size of this guy. Now, it's looking for this rotation angle, assuming that due east is 0 here, or we can choose the base angle, and I want to do this base angle because I want that rotation to start at the top, that little grab point. So I'm going to pick that top point there, and you can see from there I can actually choose how far this this arrow will rotate. So again, going to match a full 360 here. You can see that I now have a little yellow exclamation mark. Now, something to preface with all of this, if you are creating a dynamic block, definitely research how to accomplish that so that you do it properly and it functions. But basically we go into our actions now and put a rotate action to it. It asks us to select that parameter, which is this angle guy, and asks us to select the objects. Now, I don't want to include the north in the rotation, so I'm just going to select everything else and then hit enter. You can see that exclamation goes away, and now I have a rotate action here. So to test this out, we can obviously save and see this block, but I can go up into my block editor and hit test block. And this sort of does a temporary little save to it so I can see how it would be functioning. So I can select it. Here's my block. I can move it, move it wherever I want to. But I can select it and see there's my pick box or my grab point. And as I move around, it rotates. So it looks like it's doing the proper thing. So I can go ahead and close that test block. And we'll come back over here. And we can save this block. Now, I would prefer to save this block into a new file, so we can just do a save as. We would give it a block definition name. You can see that all of these definitions are in there already. And you'll probably see here's our N scale rotate that we have already defined in there. And we can save that to a drawing file. So we can now save this wherever we want to. I can save it just onto the desktop so that we can later insert it in and test it out. But no need, I already did save it. But basically that's how you create a dynamic block. It's fairly simple, but again, you need to do your research on that stuff. So we will close this block editor. We'll discard the changes, and we will do one more save. I want to show a couple cool tools that Land Effects provides that helps with some of these items. So get a little bit more, I wouldn't call them dynamic blocks, but a little added features for these blocks. So again, we want to save our little stamp guy into our system so that we can just place it into our drawings. And you can see that I've got some text here. And this text is static. It's not going to change or anything. I just go into that and adjust it to whatever I need it to. We can, however, make those attributes, and those attributes could prompt us to fill it out. So as we place this block, it gives us that ability to just change it on the fly so that we don't have to go into it later and edit it. And we have a cool little tool here called Text to a Trib. You can see it pop up down there, and it asks us to select the text. And if you click on this guy, it puts in the tag, a prompt, and a default. So we just leave all that the same so that we know there's not a main person that's getting put there. And we can do the same thing to our date. Just ask it a question, say OK. So now these guys, if you look in our properties, is an attribute definition. This guy is static because we don't want him changing. This is when our guy needs to be updated. So basically from here, I can go into our blocks drop down and save block. Insertion point, we'll want to go right in there into the middle. Again, if you have specific OSNAP settings on, it makes it really easy to find that in middle point. We'll do the select all of these objects here, and we will put it into a discipline graphic. Into our user defined area is a good spot for it, and we'll just call this stamp. All right. So now there's our preview. You can see that it didn't fill the screen completely because of my aspect ratio here. Could have done that a little bit better. You can see a little snap of this north arrow, but we want this guy 1:1, no rotation. We'll save him. So basically we're ready to place him into our drawing. And if we were to go over to our sheet here where I know I want my stamp to be set right here, I could go ahead and I can place this guy. And here's our little stamp, so that's cool. And we'll place him. And oh my goodness, he is ginormous. And this is what I wanted to show you, is if something happens like this, we know that something is wrong with this block. And we need a source block to make sure that he's scaled correctly, because we're looking at inserting this guy on paper, and he's definitely bigger than our 3-foot paper. So we'll hit escape so that it doesn't place it. However, if I insert, you can see that that definition made its way into this drawing. And no matter what I do, he is saved into this drawing as this, this big file. And the only way to get rid of him is to PRG or purge and purge that instance out. So if I go to insert again, you can now see he is not there. That is what we need to do to get that block definition out of this drawing. So what we can do is go into our folder, go to our discipline graphics, and find that file. If we can open that file and find this guy, select everything, we'll scale. We want to base point this at 0, 0 so that we're scaling from that center. And we're going to reference 2 points. First point and second point. 1 on each side. And I'm going to give it a reference of a 2-inch title block. And that should, sorry, a stamp. So if we zoom into that guy, everything else looks appropriate. So we can just go ahead and save him. All right. Close this guy, and we'll come back to our drawing here. So now, if I go ahead and I insert, I haven't done anything else but save that drawing, made sure it's purged out of the file, and grab him and press him. You can see now he's a lot better. Now, obviously 2 inches doesn't fit this title block, but we'll say that's good. And once we click it in to place it, this is where those attributes kick into play. So the date, whatever the date is for our deal, hit enter, and the name, and hit enter. And you can see now that it's placed that guy with the information automatically. So makes it very, very simple to use that block right away. When something goes awry, you can see that it's pretty easy to fix. Understanding those block definitions, understanding that the way that that actually works. Before I move on, are there any questions?
Yeah, we've got a lot of questions rolling in, which is great. Just a few ones I can highlight. Fun fact, what does LK stand for the block layer name? It is L is for landscape and K is for block. And then kind of moving through, we had some questions just on some layers in the blocks, which is really great that you guys are excited about that. Kind of things with but yeah, just kind of questions regarding the layers and blocks, but I think we're answering them all pretty well. None I think that we really need to cover right now. So you can continue on.
Cool. So basically we've covered what our standard blocks are, and we do try to stick to those. Since Land Effects does a stellar job with really tying data to those and making them seem a little bit more dynamic than basically they are. It's just doing it in a more automated way. We also have kind of, if you think back to the old way of doing things, you can set your blocks to annotative, and obviously that deals with at what scale they're going to show up at what size, or if you want them a specific size, it's constant throughout the drawing, but based on different scaled areas, that kind of thing. Now we have the ability to handle that a lot more seamlessly and a lot more simpler. And I'm going to show that right now with our little work areas for these different areas, so that we can really show the power of not only how dynamic these blocks are, even though they're just standard, but how they actually function. So basically I want to start with being able to just place a tree. And this tree is 1-to-1. So no matter if I'm in a 1-to-30 scale or 1-to-10 scale or even a 1-to-20 or our overall 1-to-40, everything is the same. This tree is not changing sizes. He is the size that he is. And so what does change though is how your text reads, especially for labeling something for a specific size plan. Our actual text needs to show up on paper at a specific size. And so how do we handle that? Well, these blocks, these are just standard blocks. Again, fully editable from your plant label section and what kind of label you have, and change that and adjust it to whatever you want. But when Land Effects inserts it, it recognizes that there are different scales, and so it does place these without doing any additional switching of settings. It places these at the appropriate text scale for when you actually print this thing on paper. And so what I can do here is show you. If we move over to this spot, to the right location, you can see that all of my text, no matter what scale that I'm set at, my viewports are set to 1 to 30, 1 to 20. You can see the trees are different sizes because that's how they will when you measure it out by scale. But you can see the text all matches in every one of these. It's the exact same. Obviously that guy's not because he is in our viewport from the other scale. But if you look across the different scales, it's that simple. If I go ahead and I use other block types, so when we get into talking about either lighting or even our map graphics is a really good example. These typically are consistently sized. You want to see those the same size across all your plans. You can edit any of these blocks, by the way, selecting it and changing this to be dim style, dim scale, or 1 to 1. But these guys are set to dim scale. So if I place him, I can place this guy right in paper space. And we'll say this is Highway 101. And so he's in paper. This is how he should be sized graphically. If I go into model space and I place that same block, you can see that it looks really big. And if I hover into any of these work areas, it changes size. So I can place a guy here and here and here and here. They all look different, but as they come over, this is where we really care about them. They all look the same. So this guy to this guy to wherever I place that guy. There he is. Every one of those is the exact same size. So we've handled a lot of this old way of trying to put different scales to different symbols very seamlessly. So something to also remember. Going into colored, this is a big question with a lot of people, and we have this whole color rendered side of things, and we have the ability to, as we're doing our planting plan, or even our site color and stuff, but our planting plan has the ability to assign a color block to each one. And this is where it gets very tricky as we start to want all these different options, because color functions a little bit differently. And what I mean by that is, as we turn on our color, it takes these existing blocks and it swaps them out. It doesn't just color the blocks that are there, it actually swaps them out for new blocks. And the reason it does that is a couple things. It's easier for the system to look through and change that definition out for a new plant, and the file size is drastically smaller. If we had these plants, and I was playing around with this, and I'll admit I was super excited to be able to have this be a potential, but it gets really, really crazy is if I place my little plant that I created as a dynamic block, you can actually see I added a bunch of different colors, which is really neat. It gives us the ability to swap out really quickly with that. Not saying that this is not still a possibility, but this is some of those things that we need to think about and sort of come to terms with. Is this guy bloats the file size quite a bit if you put several of them in your drawing, which is a concern. So the way we do it now and function with just turning them on and off is really a good situation to have that ability to still swap out stuff so fast and still get the look that you want. So something to think about even on that side. They're all new blocks. They're all different blocks. Um, but how those actually function, what are those some of those tools? Um, Again, going to the power of using these blocks through and how they actually function. Um, we have our dynamic block in here. And if we go ahead and we want to copy this guy along a line, since that is dynamic, he actually pulls, and we can randomly rotate this block. He pulls all instances of that block, and it puts them in at random spots so that it doesn't look the same ever. So we can go ahead and we can make a rock wall. We can even arc it around here and keep going this way. Just like that, and it's all the same block, which makes it very easy to count up that one instance of the block but still have the ability to have it look differently. And if we need to go into one of those guys and switch them out for a different one, it's that easy. And then if we need to, since we have properly set up our block, we can actually go ahead and turn on the color. And that color turns on throughout all instances of that block, which means I can then go through and make any changes that I want to, and color any instance of that block and regenerate your plan, and it changes throughout all of them. So making changes and corrections to the way that that looks, we've definitely streamlined that process in relation to the blocks. Last thing I'm going to leave with us here is it is hard to know what layers are within that, because since we're already putting this guy on a L site blocks layer automatically so that they're appropriately categorized out. How do I know what that red is, or how do I know what that green is? What layer is that? Because we have all of those different different layers that we've created. XList is a great way to click on something and see what layer it's on, what the object is. So just clicking on that and clicking on the line, got to obviously click on an actual line. So you can see that's bolder color still. Let's turn off the color and click on this guy. So you can see what it is that's in that layer and how it's actually functioning. So it makes it really powerful. You don't need to go in and edit these blocks. You can simply just click on any of those lines and see what that layer is and make adjustments appropriately. So with that, I'm sure we missed tons of stuff, and we could go on and on and on. So maybe it's a next webinar of more advanced stuff. But Amanda, any last closing questions or comments?
There were a lot of questions rolled in right at the end. So for anybody that I haven't been able to get back to you on the questions, you can absolutely go to our technical support page on our website, and we will try and follow up on any of the questions that we haven't answered. But in general, it's just a lot of great ideas coming in. Obviously, this webinar has really sparked the creative side of all of the people kind of watching, which is pretty much what we were going for. So I think pretty successful in terms of that. Yeah, that's about it. So I think unless you had anything else to cover, it's a little after an hour, so it's probably time to wrap this up.
Yeah, no, closing remarks would be, as we talked about all this stuff, guys, there's a lot more that we could cover, but I hope you guys really do start to appreciate what not only LandFX is doing to help with how these blocks function and stuff, but give you a better understanding of how the block functions so that you can start to create and bring that creativity back into what you were doing before. So thank you guys, and have a lovely weekend.